A nameless boy raised like a prisoner is thrown into an apocalypse where running is not enough. By chapter 14, survival becomes a brutal lesson. Monsters can only be beaten if he learns what keeps them alive. Spoiler warning for chapters 2 through 14 of this Korean manhwa. The story begins with a black-haired boy who has lived under confinement, fear, and training instead of a normal childhood. His father figure treats disaster like something expected, not random, and the boy is forced to survive before he even understands the rules of the world. When the apocalypse finally unfolds, cities break, people vanish, survivors turn on each other, and grotesque creatures start hunting anyone left alive. Chapter 2 pulls us back to one day before everything collapses. The black-haired boy wakes from a terrifying vision inside a bare brick room, shaken by images of waves, crying birds, bones, and a vast ruin. Instead of comfort, the older man with round glasses appears with that calm, controlled menace that makes the scene even worse. He treats the boy's fear like part of training, keeps him confined, and uses ropes and violence to maintain control. The boy realizes something about this man has changed. His suffering seems to be making the man stronger or more certain. When the boy resists, red intrusive imagery flashes through the sequence, blurring fear, memory, and possible warning. The chapter ends with the father-like figure still looming over him, proving escape is not just physical. It is psychological. By chapter 4, the nightmare has become a landscape. The black-haired teenage boy wakes on broken ground in a rocky, ruined area, dazed and dirty, with wreckage around him instead of walls. Almost immediately, the world teaches him its new rule: hesitate and something will eat you. Grotesque insect-like monsters appear, and the boy is forced into a panic chase across rubble, vehicles, and bridge-like structures. He trips, scrambles, hides, and keeps moving because fighting head-on is impossible. The chapter also slips into darker memory and inner narration, tying his survival instinct to fear and to a girl whose connection to him is still unclear. Every escape only reveals more monsters moving through the city ruins. This chapter turns the story from imprisonment into open-world terror. Chapter 5 slows the chase just long enough to show what separates this boy from ordinary victims. He stands battered in a sunlit ruin, bruised and exhausted, remembering a flash that changed the world and made people disappear. The city is now fire, debris, and silence broken by monsters. In his memory, the bespectacled man returns as a cruel instructor, framing survival knowledge as the only thing that matters when normal weapons and common sense fail. The boy wants to live, but the chapter refuses to make that desire heroic or clean. He faces a large glowing-eyed monster and survives by dodging, enduring pain, using terrain, and improvising with whatever he can find. He is not overpowered yet. His power is that he keeps thinking while terrified. Chapter 6 brings other people into the equation, and that makes the apocalypse even messier. The dark-haired young survivor and a blonde girl move through a devastated city filled with rubble, bodies, and wounded people. Their conversation suggests they are trying to make sense of what just happened, but the wider survivor group is already cracking. A short-haired man, a red-haired woman, and other adults challenge, question, or argue with them, and the blonde girl looks defensive under that pressure. Then the ruined street erupts again as monster-like or infected attackers rush in. Panic replaces debate. The young man and the blonde girl are forced into frantic movement across broken roads and elevated beams. By the end, the blonde girl is shaken and exhausted, while the dark-haired figure remains nearby. Trust has not been built yet, but shared danger is forcing them together. Chapter 7 opens with the black-haired boy recovering after another dangerous ordeal. The blonde girl stays close, checking on him while he lies injured or exhausted in the ruined darkness. Their discussion is tense because both of them understand that survival now depends on information, family, and what each person is hiding. A flash of red eyes or monstrous imagery suggests the boy is carrying trauma or a threat that is not fully visible. The scene then shifts toward a settlement where civilians and armed defenders are trying to organize what remains. The boy becomes tied to an urgent medical crisis involving his injured father. But the only available person with medical skill appears to be Hwang Byum, identified by an ID card and implied to be a veterinarian. The idea of surgery creates panic, because saving someone may require trusting the wrong kind of expert. Chapter 8 changes the setting into something more controlled and more disturbing. A doctor-like authority and harsh supervisors move young survivors or test subjects through a facility, while the blonde schoolgirl is pushed to join the others instead of staying behind. The adults speak like obedience is not optional, which makes the place feel less like rescue and more like selection. Inside this system, the black-haired boy undergoes a frightening inner trial. Darkness, a huge eye-like image, and monstrous pressure surround him, as if fear itself is trying to swallow him or expose what he really is. But he resists instead of surrendering. Back with the group, an aggressive boy threatens him, the blonde girl physically intervenes, and the authority figure reminds everyone that orders are absolute. The survivors are not just escaping monsters now. They are being processed. Chapter 9 follows a smaller group of child survivors moving through a cramped, damaged shelter. A brown-haired boy, a young dark-haired girl, and others speak cautiously as they navigate an underground or ruined building. When they reach a larger refuge, adults and civilians are gathered like they are trying to create order, but the tension in the room says order is already fragile. An adult man questions or instructs the children, and then the atmosphere shifts. Something outside or nearby triggers panic, impact, and sudden violence. The black-haired boy becomes separated into darker, more dangerous spaces, and the chapter slides into memory or inner emotion. The images suggest rejection, loneliness, and a girl trying to reach him instead of abandoning him. The action matters, but the emotional turn matters more. The apocalypse attacks his body, while his past attacks his will to connect. Chapter 10 starts with the survivors regrouping indoors after earlier chaos. Several adults and younger survivors talk tensely while the black-haired young man stays quiet, observing more than participating. A blonde young man and older men seem to discuss what happened, and suspicion circles back toward the black-haired survivor. The group checks corridors and doorways, trying to understand whether the danger is outside or already among them. Then the fragile calm collapses when a wounded or transformed woman appears. Blood, glowing green eyes, and violent supernatural imagery take over the chapter, turning the room into something closer to a nightmare than a shelter. Web-like cracks or tendrils spread through the darkness as the black-haired survivor confronts a monster-like force. The chapter leaves us with the sense that infection, fear, and transformation may be connected in ways no survivor understands yet. Chapter 13 opens like a wound being reopened. The narration suggests the survivors were trying to bury terrible memories, but the horrors they avoided are not finished with them. Inside a damaged shelter or enclosed underground space, a group of civilians faces a severely mutated, corpse-like man. He is hunched, broken-looking, and wrong in a way that makes people freeze before they even move. Some survivors panic. Others look ready to run. But one bespectacled young man argues that they cannot keep fleeing forever. He pushes the idea that they must face the creature and fight. That choice is important because it marks a shift from pure survival to collective resistance. Still, courage does not make the monster weaker. The scene becomes red, chaotic, and almost symbolic as people rush forward while the creature and its swarm-like horror close in. Chapter 14 begins with two frightened girls hiding indoors after the monster threat reaches their shelter. The blonde girl and the dark-haired girl react to movement, voices, and the sense that something unnatural is already inside. A pale face appears, an older man warns or instructs the blonde girl, and then a glowing red eye-like core appears between people. Whether it is a seed, parasite, or monster core is not fully clear, but its role is obvious. Once it appears, panic and violence follow. A woman screams, a corpse-like attacker lunges, and wounded survivors struggle on the floor. The chapter then expands into a larger fight, with the black-haired young man confronting grotesque creatures while others watch in fear. By the end, the story finally points toward a concrete next step: surviving is not enough. They must learn how to kill monsters by destroying their seeds. These chapters work because the apocalypse is not treated as one simple monster outbreak. It is a pressure test. The black-haired boy was shaped by confinement before the world collapsed, so his trauma becomes both a weakness and a survival tool. The blonde girl, the children, and the shelter survivors show the other side of disaster. People need each other, but fear makes trust unstable. The biggest reveal is the seed idea. because it gives the chaos a possible rule. If monsters have cores that can be destroyed, then the survivors may finally move from running to strategy. That is the early chapter recap. Subscribe for the next part, where we follow whether the boy can turn fear, training, and monster knowledge into a real path through the apocalypse.